The lights on the Zephyrian ship were too bright and too cold. They hurt Jake Murphy's eyes as he stood in the long metal room with the other prisoners. His hands were locked behind his back with glowing blue chains that felt warm against his skin. The chains were made for much stronger creatures than humans, but they still held him tight. Jake looked around the room without moving his head too much. He had learned to be careful about everything he did since the Zephyrians caught him 3 days ago. The alien soldiers watched the prisoners all the time with their yellow snake eyes. They carried big weapons that could burn a hole through a person in seconds. There were 12 other prisoners in the room with Jake. Most of them were much bigger and stronger looking than he was. To his left stood a creature called Grocht. Grocht was from a planet where everything was made of rock and his skin looked like gray stone. He was almost 8 feet tall and his arms were as thick as tree trunks. When he breathed, it sounded like rocks grinding together. On Jake's right was a thin blue creature with 4 arms. Her name was Lisa, and she came from a world with low gravity. Her people were known for being fast and good at climbing. Even with the chains on, she looked like she could run faster than most people could drive. Behind them were 3 soldiers from the Corth Empire. They wore heavy metal armor that covered their whole bodies. Jake had heard stories about how tough Corth soldiers were. They said one Corth warrior could fight 10 normal soldiers and win. But right now all of these strong fighters were prisoners just like Jake. The mining colony on Kepler 442b had fallen to the Zephyrians in just 2 hours. Jake's unit had been sent to help defend the colony, but they arrived too late. The Zephyrians had better ships, better weapons, and more soldiers. The door at the end of the room opened with a loud hiss. Heavy footsteps echoed off the metal walls as someone walked toward them. Jake kept his eyes forward, but he could see the other prisoners getting nervous. Even Big Grocht shifted his weight from one foot to the other. General Corth walked into the room like he owned the entire universe. He was 9 feet tall and covered in black scales that looked like armor. His head was long and narrow like a snake's, and his yellow eyes glowed in the bright lights. When he smiled, Jake could see rows of sharp white teeth. 2 other Zephyrians followed behind the general. One was thinner and wore a uniform with silver marks on it. The other was shorter but looked meaner, with scars across his face and neck. General Corth stopped in front of Grocht first. The alien general had to look up to meet the rock creature's eyes. "Thrakari warrior," Corth said in a voice that sounded like gravel falling down a hill. "Your people have fought us before. You are strong, but not strong enough." Grocht said nothing, but his stone face showed no fear. The general moved to Lisa next. "Villani scout, fast and smart. Your people gave us some trouble on the moon of Xeris, but here you are, caught like all the rest." Lisa's 4 hands made fists, but she stayed quiet. Corth walked past the Corth soldiers without stopping. He had fought their kind many times before. But when he reached Jake, he stopped completely. The general looked down at the human for a long moment, his snake head tilting to one side. "And what are you supposed to be?" Corth asked. His voice was full of amusement, like he had just heard a funny joke. Jake looked up at the general but said nothing. He had been trained for this. Name, rank, and service number. Nothing else. Corth laughed, and the sound filled the whole room. "Look at this thing," he said to his officers. "It has no claws, no armor, no thick skin. It looks like it would break if I breathed on it too hard." The other Zephyrians joined their general's laughter. The thin one with silver mark stepped closer to get a better look at Jake. "What species is it, General?" he asked. "I have no idea, Commander Vex," Corth replied. He walked around Jake in a slow circle like a hunter studying wounded prey. "It must be from one of those weak worlds on the edge of space, the kind that barely knows how to make fire, let alone fight wars." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his face calm. He had been angry before. He had been scared before. He had been hurt before. But he was still alive, and that meant he could still fight. "Tell me, little creature," Corth said, stopping in front of Jake again. "What is your species called? What pathetic world do you come from?" "Sergeant Jake Murphy," Jake said in a clear voice. "Service number 2847 Alpha Charlie. Corth's smile got wider. Is that all you know how to say? Like a broken recording device? He looked at his officers again. I think this one might be damaged. Maybe it hit its head when we captured it. The scarred Zephyrian, Major Zisk, stepped forward. Should we put it with the other weak prisoners, General? The ones we use for cleaning and cooking? No, Corth said, shaking his head. I think I will keep this one close. It amuses me. He leaned down until his face was only inches from Jake's. His breath smelled like old meat and metal. You will be my pet, little creature. When I need to laugh, I will look at you and remember how weak some species can be. Jake met the General's yellow eyes without blinking. Sergeant Jake Murphy. Service number 2847 Alpha Charlie. This made Corth laugh even harder. Yes, keep saying that. It makes you sound even more pitiful. He stood up straight and looked at all the prisoners. Let this be a lesson to all of you. This is what happens when weak species try to fight the Zephyrian Empire. They get crushed like insects. The General walked toward the door, but stopped and looked back at Jake. Tomorrow I will show you to my entire crew. They need to see what pathetic enemies we are fighting these days. Maybe it will make them laugh too. After the Zephyrians left, the room was quiet for a long time. Finally, Grucht spoke in his grinding voice. Human, he said. That is what you are called, yes? Jake nodded. I have heard stories about your kind, the rock creature continued, but I thought they were just myths. What kind of stories? Lysa asked with her musical voice. Grucht was quiet for a moment. Stories about a species that never gives up. Stories about creatures who look weak but fight like demons when they are angry. He looked at Jake with his deep black eyes. Stories about a people who come from a world so dangerous that surviving there makes them stronger than anyone expects. Jake didn't say anything, but something changed in his expression. It was small, so small that most people would miss it. But it was there. The other prisoners started talking quietly among themselves, but their voices sounded different now, less hopeless, less defeated. Jake stood perfectly still, his brown eyes focused on nothing in particular. But behind those calm eyes, his mind was working. He was counting the guards, memorizing their patrol routes, studying the locks on the doors, learning the ship's sounds and rhythms. The Zephyrians thought he was weak. They thought he was broken. They thought he was harmless. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The next morning came too early for Jake Murphy. The bright lights in the prison room never turned off, so he had to guess when it was day or night. His body felt stiff from sleeping on the cold metal floor, but he had slept in worse places before. The door opened with its usual loud hiss. This time, 4 Zephyrian guards came in instead of the usual 2. Their black scales caught the light as they moved, and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. You. The lead guard pointed at Jake with a clawed finger. The General wants to see his pet. Jake stood up slowly. His legs were sore, but he didn't let it show on his face. The guards put extra chains on his arms and legs. The chains were heavy and made walking difficult, but Jake had expected this. They were afraid he might try to run. The guards pushed him through long hallways filled with busy Zephyrian soldiers. The ship was huge, much bigger than any human ship Jake had ever seen. Everywhere he looked, there were weapons and armor and computers with blinking lights. The Zephyrians had built this ship for war, and it showed. They took him to a large room where many Zephyrian officers sat around a big table. Maps of star systems covered the walls, and holographic displays showed the positions of different fleets. This was the command center, where the important decisions were made. General Corth stood at the head of the table talking to his officers about their next attack. When he saw Jake being brought in, his snake-like face broke into a wide grin. Ah, perfect timing, Corth said loudly. Officers, I want you to meet our special prisoner. All the Zephyrians turned to look at Jake. Some of them laughed immediately. Others just stared in confusion like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. This pathetic creature, Corth continued, walking over to stand next to Jake, represents everything wrong with the species we fight. Look at it. No natural weapons, no armor, no strength to speak of. Commander Vex, the thin Zephyrian with silver marks, leaned forward in his chair. What species is it, General? I have never seen anything so fragile. It calls itself human, Corth replied. From some backward world that probably just learned how to make fire. He grabbed Jake's arm and held it up for everyone to see. Look at this skin, soft as a newborn Zephyrian. And these hands, no claws at all. How does it even feed itself? The officers laughed and made comments to each other. Major Zisk, the scarred one, stood up from his seat. May I examine it closer, General? Of course, Corth said, stepping back. Zisk walked around Jake like he was studying a strange animal. Its teeth are flat, he observed. Not built for tearing, meat. And look at these legs, thin as sticks. I bet I could snap them with one hand. Go ahead and try, Corth said with amusement. But Zisk shook his head. It might break completely. Then what would we do for entertainment? More laughter filled the room. Jake stood perfectly still through all of this, his face showing nothing. He had learned long ago that showing anger or fear only made bullies stronger. Instead, he listened and watched and remembered everything. Tell them your name, pet, Corth ordered. Sergeant Jake Murphy, Jake said in a clear voice. Service, number 2847 Alpha Charlie. That's all it ever says, Corth explained to his officers. Like a simple machine with only one message. Captain Nex, a female Zephyrian with golden scales, raised her hand. General, if these humans are so weak, how did they even get to space? Their technology must be stolen from stronger species. Exactly my thinking, Corth agreed. No species this pathetic could develop star travel on their own. They probably begged some advanced race to give them ships. Jake almost smiled at that, but he caught himself. If only they knew the truth about human technology. If only they knew what humans could build when they put their minds to it. The meeting continued for another hour. The Zephyrians talked about their plans to attack more human colonies. They spoke about humans like they were talking about insects. Annoying, but easy to crush. Jake memorized every detail he heard. When the meeting ended, Corth had Jake brought to the ship's main hall. This was where all the regular soldiers ate their meals and spent their free time. Hundreds of Zephyrians were there, and they all stopped what they were doing when they saw the general walk in with his prisoner. Soldiers of the Empire, Corth announced in a booming voice. I want you to see the enemy we are fighting. He pushed Jake forward into the center of the room. The Zephyrians formed a circle around them, their yellow eyes glowing with curiosity and amusement. This is a human, Corth said. Look carefully because this is what victory looks like. When you crush an enemy so completely that even their strongest warriors look like this. A young Zephyrian soldier raised his hand. General, are you sure that's a warrior? It looks more like a servant or a cook. That's what I thought too, Corth replied. But it was wearing a military uniform when we captured it. Can you believe that? This creature thought it could fight us. The soldiers laughed and pointed at Jake. Some of them made jokes about how they could defeat 10 humans with their eyes closed. Others wondered if humans even knew what weapons were for. Watch this, Corth said. He walked up to Jake and pushed him hard in the chest. Jake stumbled backward but didn't fall. It can barely keep its balance, and look, it doesn't even try to fight back. No pride, no anger, just stands there like a scared animal. But Jake wasn't scared. He was counting. 23 soldiers in the room, 4 exits, 2 weapon racks on the walls. The guards were relaxed because they didn't see him as a threat. That was good. That was very good. A big Zephyrian sergeant stepped forward. General, may I ask it a question? Go ahead, Sergeant Thok. Thok leaned down until his scarred face was close to Jake's. Human, how many of your kind does it take to equal one Zephyrian warrior? Jake looked at him calmly. Sergeant Jake Murphy, service number 2847 Alpha Charlie. Thok laughed. It really is broken, isn't it? Completely, Corth agreed. This is what happens when weak species try to play at war. Their minds cannot handle the stress. For the next 2 hours, the Zephyrians used Jake as entertainment. They made him stand in different positions. They asked him stupid questions. They compared his size to theirs. Through it all, Jake said nothing except his name and service number. But inside his head, he was working. He studied every face, learned every name he heard, and mapped every part of the ship they showed him. The Zephyrians thought he was broken, but his mind was sharper than it had ever been. Finally, Corth got bored with the show. "Take it back to the prison," he ordered the guards. "Tomorrow we will have more fun with our pet human." As they led him away, Jake heard the Zephyrians still talking and laughing about him. They were so sure of themselves, so confident that humans were nothing to worry about. Back in the prison room, the other prisoners looked at Jake with concern. Grocht spoke first. "Are you hurt, human?" Jake shook his head. "I'm fine." "They treated you badly," Lisa said with anger. In her musical voice, I could hear them laughing from here. Jake sat down on the floor and leaned against the wall. "Let them laugh," he said quietly. "Laughing enemies make mistakes, and I need them to make mistakes." The other prisoners didn't understand what he meant, but something in his voice made them feel better. Jake closed his eyes and began planning. The Zephyrians had shown him much more of their ship today. They had revealed their numbers, their weapons, and most importantly, their attitude. They thought humans were weak. They thought humans were broken. They thought humans gave up easily. Soon, they would learn the truth. Jake had been a prisoner for 6 days when everything changed. He was sitting on the cold floor of the prison room, watching the guards through half-closed eyes. They thought he was sleeping, but Jake never really slept anymore. He just rested, his body while his mind stayed alert. The alarm started at exactly 800 ship time. It was a loud, angry sound that hurt Jake's ears and made all the prisoners jump to their feet. Red lights flashed on the walls, and he could hear Zephyrian voices shouting in the hallways outside. "What's happening?" Lisa asked, her forehands pressed against her ears. Grocht's stone face looked worried. "That's a battle alarm. Someone is attacking." Jake felt his heart beat faster, but he kept his face calm. Deep down, he hoped he knew who was coming. The prison door burst open, and Commander Vex ran in with 6 guards. The thin Zephyrian's silver scales were darker than usual, which meant he was scared or angry. Maybe both. "You," Vex pointed at Jake. "The general wants to see you now." They put the heavy chains on Jake again and dragged him through hallways filled with running soldiers. Everyone looked worried. Zephyrian officers were shouting orders, and junior soldiers were moving weapons and supplies at top speed. In the command center, General Corth stood in front of a huge screen that showed space around their ship. Jake could see dots of light. In the distance, other ships. Lots of other ships. "There," Corth said when he saw Jake. "Our pet human is here. Maybe it can tell us about these mysterious visitors." On the screen, Admiral Threx appeared. He was older than Corth, with darker scales and more scars. His yellow eyes looked tired and worried. "General Corth," Threx said in a grave voice. "We have a problem. A large fleet has appeared at the edge of our territory. Our scouts say they're using technology we've never seen before." Coreth's confidence seemed to crack a little. "What kind of technology?" "Ships that move faster than they should. Weapons that cut through our armor like it's made of paper. And General..." Threx paused. "They're flying the same flag as your prisoner there." All eyes in the room turned to Jake. He looked at the screen and saw something that made his heart sing. In the distance, getting closer every minute, was a fleet of human ships. Real human ships, not the old cargo vessels the colonists had been using. "Impossible," Corth said, but his voice wasn't as strong as before. "This creature's species barely knows how to use fire." "Our scouts disagree," Admiral Threx continued. "They report that these ships are more advanced than anything in our database, and General, there's something else. We tried to contact them, and they responded in the same language your prisoner uses." Major Zisk stepped forward. "Admiral, surely you're not suggesting that this weak creature belongs to an advanced species?" "I'm suggesting that we may have made a serious mistake," Threx replied. "General Corth, I need you to find out everything you can about these humans. And I need you to do it quickly." The screen went dark. The command center was quiet for a long moment. Then Corth slowly turned to look at Jake. The amusement was gone from his snake-like face. Now there was only concern. "Tell me about your people," Corth said in a voice that tried to sound commanding but came out worried instead. Jake looked at the general for a long time before speaking. "Sergeant Jake Murphy, service number 2847 Alpha Charlie." "No!" Corth shouted, his temper breaking. "No more games. Those ships out there, are they from your species?" Jake smiled for the first time since his capture. It wasn't a big smile, but everyone in the room could see it. "You wanted to know about humans, General. You're about to get a very good lesson." Commander Vex ran to a computer station and started typing quickly. "General, I'm searching our databases for any information about this human species." "What are you finding?" Corth demanded. Vex's face grew paler as he read. "Sir, according to our records, humans have no official homeworld, no central government, no main fleet base. It's like they appeared from nowhere." "That's impossible," Major Zisk said. "Every species has a homeworld. Not humans." Vex continued reading. "And sir, there's more. Every recorded battle involving humans has ended the same way." "How?" Corth asked, though he looked like he didn't want to hear the answer. "Human victory, sir. Every single time." The room fell silent again. Jake could see fear creeping into the Zephyrian faces around him. It was a good feeling. Corth walked over to Jake and grabbed him by the shoulders. "What are you?" he demanded. "What kind of species are you really?" Jake looked up at the general with calm brown eyes. "We're the species that survived on a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years," he said quietly. "We're the species that learned to fight back against everything: diseases, predators, natural disasters, each other. We're the species that never learned how to give up." "But you look so weak," Vex said from his computer station. "That's what everything on our world thought too," Jake replied. "The big predators with sharp teeth, the tiny germs that could kill in hours, the storms that could level mountains. They all thought we looked weak." His smile got a little wider. They were all wrong. On the main screen, the human ships were getting closer. Jake could see their sleek shapes now, so different from the bulky Zephyrian vessels. They moved through space like sharks through water, fast, deadly, and beautiful. "Sir," a young officer called from his station. "The human fleet is trying to communicate with us." "Put it through," Corth ordered. The screen flickered, and suddenly Jake was looking at the bridge of a human ship. A woman in a crisp military uniform appeared on screen. She had short black hair and serious dark eyes. Jake had never seen her before, but he felt proud just looking at her. "This is Captain Elena Ross of the Human Defense Force ship Defiant," she said in a calm, professional voice. "You are holding one of our people prisoner. His name is Sergeant Jake Murphy, and we want him back." Corth tried to look strong, but Jake could see him shaking slightly. "I am General Corth of the Zephyrian Empire. Your soldier is our prisoner by right of conquest." Captain Ross's expression didn't change, but somehow she looked more dangerous. "General, you have exactly 1 hour to return Sergeant Murphy to us unharmed. If you refuse, we will come and take him ourselves." "You dare threaten the Zephyrian Empire?" Corth roared. "We have conquered half the galaxy." "That's impressive," Ross said without any emotion in her voice. "But you've never fought humans before. You should ask around. Find someone who has. Ask them how it went." The communication ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Corth turned to Jake with wild eyes. "What do you people want? What are you planning?" Jake stood as straight as his chains would allow. "Right now we just want our soldier back, but you've been attacking human colonies, General. You've been killing human families. That makes this personal now." "Personal?" Zisk asked. "Humans don't fight for territory or resources," Jake explained. "We fight for each other. When you hurt one of us, you hurt all of us. And when you hurt all of us..." He looked around the room at the frightened Zephyrian faces. "Well, you're about to find out what happens then." Through the windows of the command center, they could all see the human fleet getting closer. The ships moved in perfect formation, like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. General Corth had spent days mocking the weak human prisoner. Now he was beginning to understand that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The hour was almost up when Jake made his move. The Zephyrian guards had brought him back to the prison room after the meeting with Captain Ross. They were nervous and jumpy, checking their weapons every few minutes and talking in worried whispers. Jake sat against the wall, watching them through eyes that looked half asleep. But his mind was wide awake, going over every detail of his escape plan. He had been thinking about it for 6 days, and now it was time. The first guard was named Sergeant Crix. He was young and inexperienced, always looking around like he expected danger from every shadow. The second guard was older and meaner, but he was also lazy. He liked to sit down and complain about everything. At exactly 2300 ship time, when the guards changed shifts, Jake acted. The shift change happened the same way every night. Crix would leave first, and the lazy guard would wait for the new guards to arrive before leaving his post. But tonight, Jake had done something different to his chains. The energy shackles were designed to hold creatures much stronger than humans, but they were also designed with certain assumptions. The makers assumed prisoners would try to break them with force. They assumed prisoners would pull and strain against them until they gave up. They never assumed a prisoner would be flexible enough to dislocate his own shoulder. Jake had learned this trick during his Special Forces training. It hurt terribly, but humans could survive pain that would break other species. He bit down on his tongue to keep from making noise as his shoulder popped out of place. The joint felt like it was on fire, but now his arm was thin enough to slip through the shackle. The lazy guard was reading something on his tablet and not paying attention. Jake slipped his arm free, then quickly popped his shoulder back into place. The pain made his eyes water, but he stayed silent. Moving slowly and carefully, Jake worked on the shackles around his legs. The Zephyrians had put them on tight, but not tight enough. Human ankle joints were different from most species. With some painful twisting, Jake managed to slip his feet free. Now came the hard part. Jake had to get past the guard without making any noise. The lazy guard was sitting near the door, still reading his tablet. His weapon was lying on a table next to him, just out of easy reach. Jake moved like smoke across the floor. Years of training had taught him how to walk without making sound, how to control his breathing, how to become invisible even in bright light. The guard never looked up from his tablet. Jake reached the weapon first. It was a Zephyrian plasma rifle, much heavier than human weapons, but not too heavy for Jake to handle. Before the guard could react, Jake had the rifle pointed at his head. "Don't move," Jake whispered. "Don't make a sound." The guard's yellow eyes went wide with shock and fear. He started to reach for an alarm button on the wall, but Jake shook his head. "I said don't move. I know how to use this weapon. Do you want to find out how good human reflexes really are?" The guard slowly put his hands where Jake could see them. His whole body was shaking with fear. "Good," Jake said softly. "Now we're going to free my friends, and then we're going to take a little walk around your ship." The other prisoners had been watching in amazement. Grucht's stone face showed something that might have been a smile. "I knew there was more to you than they thought," he rumbled. Jake used the guard's security codes to unlock the other prisoners' chains. As soon as Lisa was free, she moved to the door with her forearms ready to fight. The Corthex soldiers checked their armor and flexed their muscles. Even in prison, they looked dangerous. "Listen carefully," Jake told them all. "This ship has weak points, but we need to work together to hit them. Grucht, you and the Corthex soldiers take the engine room. Lisa, you're fast enough to reach the communication center. I'll handle the bridge." "What about weapons?" one of the Corthex soldiers asked. Jake smiled grimly. "This is a warship. There are weapons everywhere. We just need to know where to look." The first part of their escape went smoothly. Jake had memorized the guard rotations during his days of captivity. He knew exactly when the hallways would be empty and which routes to take. They moved through the ship like ghosts. Jake's training had taught him how to disable security cameras without triggering alarms. Lisa's natural speed and climbing ability let her reach places the Zephyrians never expected intruders to go. The Corthex soldiers used their strength to break through barriers silently. But the easy part didn't last long. A young Zephyrian technician spotted them near the armory. He opened his mouth to shout an alarm, but Grucht moved faster than anyone expected. The stone creature's massive hand covered the technician's mouth, and his other hand pressed against the alien's throat. "Sleep," Grucht rumbled softly. The technician's eyes rolled back and he went limp. "How did you do that?" Jake asked. "Pressure points," Grucht replied. "All species have them. You just need to know where to look." They reached the armory without any more problems. Jake had watched the Zephyrians enter their security codes enough times to figure out the pattern. The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing rows of weapons and armor. "Take what you need," Jake told the others. "But remember, we're not trying to fight the whole ship. We just need to disable it long enough for the human fleet to get here." Lisa grabbed a set of light weapons that matched her quick fighting style. The Corth soldiers found heavier guns that could punch through thick armor. Grucht picked up something that looked more like a small cannon than a rifle. Jake chose a Zephyrian assault rifle and extra ammunition. He also grabbed some grenades and a device that could override electronic locks. Everything he needed for the next part of his plan. "Remember," he told them as they prepared to split up. 15 minutes, then we meet at the main shuttle bay. If anyone doesn't show up, the rest of us leave without them." "What if the shuttle bay is heavily guarded?" Lisa asked. Jake's smile was cold and dangerous. "Then we'll show them what happens. When different species work together." The group split up and moved toward their targets. Jake made his way toward the bridge, staying in the shadows and avoiding the main corridors. He could hear alarms starting to sound in the distance. Probably Grucht and the Corth soldiers had reached the engine room. The bridge was heavily defended, as Jake had expected, but the Zephyrians were looking for a large attack force, not one human moving alone through their own ship. Jake used their expectations against them. He crawled through the ventilation system, something his smaller human frame made possible, but would have been impossible for most other species. The metal ducts were cramped and uncomfortable, but they led right where he needed to go. When Jake dropped down into the bridge through a maintenance hatch, the Zephyrians were so surprised they barely had time to reach for their weapons. Jake moved through them like lightning, using their confusion and his superior training to take control of the situation. "Bridge secured," he said into his stolen communicator. "All teams report." "Engine room secured," came Grucht's grinding voice. "Communications down," Lisa's musical voice added. "Weapon systems disabled," reported the Corth team leader. Jake looked around the bridge at the captured Zephyrian officers. They stared at him like he was some kind of demon that had appeared from their worst nightmares. "Now comes the fun part," Jake said to himself, settling into the captain's chair. Through the bridge windows he could see the human fleet getting closer. It was time to show the Zephyrians what humans could really do when they stopped pretending to be weak. General Corth ran onto his own bridge to find Jake Murphy sitting in the captain's chair like he belonged there. The human had removed his dirty prison clothes and was now wearing a Zephyrian officer's uniform that he had taken from somewhere. It was too big for him, but somehow he still looked dangerous. "Impossible," Corth breathed, staring at the scene before him. His bridge crew was tied up in the corner, and alien prisoners were standing guard with stolen weapons. "How did you do this?" Jake looked up at the general with calm brown eyes. "I told you before, General. Humans are survivors. We adapt. We overcome. We never give up." "But you're just one small creature," Corth said, his voice shaking with anger. "And fear. How could you take my entire ship?" "I wasn't alone," Jake replied, standing up from the chair. "Grucht and his people know about strength. Lisa's people know about speed. The Corth soldiers know about tactics. When you put us all together and give us a reason to fight." He gestured around the captured bridge. "This happens through the main screen." They could all see the human fleet surrounding the Zephyrian ship. The human vessels moved in perfect formation, their weapons trained on every vital system. They looked small compared to the massive Zephyrian warship, but somehow they felt more dangerous. The communication system crackled to life. Captain Elena Ross appeared on the screen again, but this time she was smiling slightly. "Sergeant Murphy," she said in a warm voice. "Good to see you're still in one piece." Captain Ross, Jake replied with a small salute. Sorry about the delay. I had to take care of some business first. I can see that, Ross said, looking around the bridge behind Jake. Nice work. Are you ready for pickup? Almost, Captain. But first, I think General Corth here needs to understand something about humans. Ross nodded. Go ahead, Sergeant. You've earned the right to speak. Jake turned to face Corth, who was standing frozen in the middle of his own bridge. The general's black scales were pale with fear, and his yellow eyes darted around looking for escape routes that didn't exist. You spent days mocking me, Jake said quietly. You called me weak. You said humans were pathetic. You used me as entertainment for your crew. His voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath it. You made one mistake, General. You thought being different meant being weak. But you are weak, Corth insisted, though his voice cracked as he said it. Look at you. No claws, no armor, no natural weapons. Jake smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. You're right. We don't have claws, so we learn to make tools that are sharper than any claw. We don't have thick skin, so we learn to make armor that's stronger than any hide. We don't have natural weapons, so we learned to make weapons that can crack planets. He walked closer to Corth, and the general took a step backward. But that's not what makes us dangerous, Jake continued. What makes us dangerous is that we never stop learning. Every time something tries to kill us, we get stronger. Every time we lose a fight, we figure out how to win the next one. And every time someone hurts our people, his eyes got harder. We make sure it never happens again. On the screen, Captain Ross cleared her throat. General Corth, I believe you've been attacking human colonies, killing human families, taking human prisoners. Corth tried to stand up straighter. The Zephyrian Empire conquers weak species. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. Not anymore, Ross said simply. Your empire just learned a very important lesson. You can't judge a species by how they look, and you definitely can't judge humans that way. One ship, Corth said desperately. You have one ship. We have hundreds. Thousands. Ross's smile got wider. Admiral Chen, would you like to show the general our full fleet? The view on the screen changed. Instead of just showing the ships around the Shadow Claw, it now showed a much larger area of space. Corth's jaw dropped open as he saw the truth. There weren't just a few human ships. There were hundreds of them, appearing out of hyperspace, like ghosts materializing from the darkness. This is Admiral Lisa Chen of the Human Defense Force, a new voice said. An older woman appeared on screen, wearing more medals than Corth had ever seen. General Corth, your empire has been attacking human settlements for 3 months. We tried diplomacy first. You ignored our messages, so now we're here to discuss terms in person. Corth looked around desperately. Through the bridge windows, he could see Zephyrian ships in the distance, but they were retreating, running away from the human fleet as fast as their engines could carry them. My ships, he said weakly, are making the smart choice, Admiral Chen replied. We sent them a simple message. Anyone who wants to keep fighting humans can stay and find out what happens. Anyone who wants to live can leave now and never come back to human space. Jake walked over to a computer terminal and pulled up a star map. Red dots showed human colonies that had been attacked. There were dozens of them. This is what your empire did to my people, Jake said to Corth. Families killed, children orphaned, entire settlements burned to the ground. He looked at the general with cold eyes. Did you think we wouldn't come for you? But how? Corth asked. How did you find us so quickly? How did you build such a fleet? We've been building this fleet for 50 years, Admiral Chen answered. Ever since we first met hostile aliens. We learned that the galaxy is full of species like yours, ones that think might makes right. So we prepared. Captain Ross appeared, on screen again. The thing is, General, we didn't want to use this fleet. We hoped we'd never have to. Humans prefer to explore, to learn, to build things. But when someone threatens our people, she shrugged. Well, we're very good at war too. Jake turned back to Corth. You called us weak because we don't look like fighters. but humans have been fighting for survival since before we even knew. Other species existed. We fought ice ages and plagues and predators. We fought each other when we had to, and we learned that the deadliest enemy is the one you underestimate. What do you want? Corth asked in a broken voice. Simple, Admiral, Chen said. Your empire leaves human space forever. You don't attack our colonies, you don't take our people prisoner. You spread the word to every other empire out there. Humans are off limits. And if we refuse, Jake answered that question, then you'll find out what happens when 3 billion years of evolution produces a species that refuses to go extinct, the bee. Bridge was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Corth nodded slowly. I accept your terms. Good, Captain Ross said. Sergeant Murphy, time to come home. Jake looked around the bridge one last time. Grucht gave him a nod of respect. Lysa smiled, with all 4 hands raised in a gesture of farewell. The Cortex soldiers stood at attention like they were saluting a superior officer. What about them? Jake asked, pointing to the other prisoners. They're free to go wherever they want, Admiral Chen replied. Any species that fought alongside humans against their captors is welcome in human space. Jake walked toward the shuttle bay but stopped next to General Corth. Remember this day, General. Remember that the weakest-looking species in the galaxy just took your ship away from you. And remember that we let you live when we could have done anything we wanted. An hour later, Jake was back on the human ship Defiant, wearing a clean uniform and eating real food for the first time in a week. Through the window of the mess hall, he could see the Zephyrian fleet jumping to hyperspace, running away as fast as they could. Captain Ross sat down across from him. How do you feel, Sergeant? Jake thought about it for a moment. Like a human, Captain. Like someone who survived something that tried to break him and came out stronger. That's what we do best, Ross agreed. Outside the window, the stars looked peaceful again, but Jake knew that somewhere out there, the word was already spreading. There was a species called humans. They looked weak, but they were anything but. They valued life, but they were excellent at war. And most importantly, they never forgot their friends or forgave their enemies. The galaxy had learned a new lesson about judging others by their appearance. It was a lesson that would be remembered for a very long time.